Hello and welcome to Moving Forward, a podcast by Good Habits. I'm your host, Remy Röhrling, and in this podcast, we will make sure that you will get all the insights you need to build a high-performing learning culture to future-proof your organization. Whether you're an HR professional, a learning and development manager, or anyone looking to give your team a leg up, you'll learn the trends and tricks to get your people learning and moving forward. In each episode, we will invite an expert or two to unpack some key statements designed to get them to sharing their best insights. Today, we're zooming in on learning influencers. What is their role in learning and development? And how do you use their enthusiasm in your organization's favor? To help unpack this, I would like to welcome Benjamin Jaksch and Maaike Talak. Hi, both of you.
Hi,
Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
And also, Benjamin, can you introduce yourself? What do you do in terms of learning?
Sure. It's an honor for me to be here and great to talk about learning influencers. What do? I started tutoring when I was 12, and ever since I was curious what makes people learn. And I was curious about the nature of the relationship between humans and how that influences our learning. And I studied electrical engineering, went a bit to the side and did some stuff, and I've been self-employed since 2018 now. And I'm still exploring within companies, trying to find out how we can use the potential of the knowledge that's there and turn that into content, turn the people into these learning influencers, and see how that can influence a positive learning culture and how people can interact in order for them to move forward.
Cool. So curiosity as a career.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
We'll get back to that in a sec.
Yeah.
But first, Maaike, who are you and what are you doing on this podcast?
That is a very good question. Yes, I am Maaike and I am actually working for Good Habits in sales. And I would consider myself as a learning influencer. And also since I talk to a lot of L&D HR specialists, that is a topic that I discuss, I would say, every day. So I hope to be able to share some insights today. And I'm happily joining this conversation. Yeah,
Cool.
Let's see how it goes.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to talking about learning influencers with you both, because this is a topic that's near and dear to all three of our hearts. As you might know, I'm a psychologist myself, so I love picking into people's brains and stuff. And we'll be doing that in 4 statements, and we'll be unpacking those along the lines, all right? So let's start with that first statement, which is, peers are the employees' most trusted advisors. And let's say that is in learning, right? What is a peer influencer?
So if you look at a company, where do people normally go if they have a question? They will ask a peer. Normally in the first stage. They won't start searching online, or they won't look into their learning management system, because the easiest way normally, if you have peers around you, or if you have their phone number, if they're not close, you will ask them how they did it. If you know somebody who already overcame that challenge, you will ask them how they did it. And that's why I think they are so influential and so important. And it's not just that direct connection. It's not just, I have your phone number, so I call you. It's also, if you put that into some content, right? If you document your journey, then I can follow you there, and I don't always need to call you, or not everybody in the organization needs to call you.
Right.
If you've already made that step. If you're an expert in AI, I would say, from my point of view, at least.
Thank you.
So if I know that, and I know I have a question, well, then I can come to you because I know you've already done something with it and you've got some experience there. And
Right.
That's why I think this connection is so important.
So I gather from this that a big part of this is trust, right?
Yeah.
Trusting someone that you know and you like.
Yeah.
So is this more about your direct colleagues or your boss, if you like that boss?
I think it's not really important who the person is and what their relationship to me is, as long as I know you're acting in my best interest. For me, trust, I don't know where I read that, but trust is based on benevolence, integrity, and a third thing. I forgot that, but benevolence is
We'll get
one
to
of
that.
them. So you're you're acting in my best interest.
Right.
And if you're my peer, I hope you are. If you're my boss, I do hope so too. If you're within my organization, I do hope so too. And that's why review systems work. That's why recommendations work on Amazon and any other platform. If I know that you're telling me the truth and you're acting in my best interest, then I will more than happily accept your advice.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's also trust from strangers, right? Which is also in your ballpark. You talk to like strangers, let's say, on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and you have to earn them their trust, but you also have to deal out that trust. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about trust, I would say. It's also about experience. Because if I have a peer who I trust a lot, but he or she might not be very experienced in the field that I am looking for experience, they might not be the perfect person to go to and ask for advice. So I think it's not just about the trust perspective, which is also very important, but still also looking at, did they already go that path? And I want to follow them. So I just want to ask which steps they took. And that is something like having a lot of experience with what have other clients done in the past? What experience have they made? What mistakes have they learned out of from? So that is something that I'm very much willing to share. So people can actually learn from the experience other ones have already made.
Right.
So I think it's a couple of components that go into like, who is being the influencer that I wanna go to when I look for something to learn. So,
I think that's the third element of the triangle I was thinking of. So experience,
You're welcome.
integrity. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. Experience, benevolence, and integrity.
Yeah.
So
Integrity is the
Yeah.
third one.
do you know what you're talking of as experience? Do you keep your promises, integrity, and do you act in my best interest?
Yeah.
So that's benevolence.
Yeah.
And only then can I trust you
Yeah.
with this topic. Like you said, if you haven't been in that situation, it's very hard for me to believe that what you're saying is true or in any way helpful to what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I actually like to compare the whole model with a family system. I don't want to say your colleagues are your family. That's a whole nother discussion. But still, if you see the management in HR as your parents, let's say the management is my mom and the HR department is my dad. Then I have a lot of siblings. Well, I personally have 3 siblings. I have an older sister, for example. And if I'm like thinking back in time, looking for advice, what my mom is telling me and my dad are telling me, obviously they are acting in my best interest. But still,
As a
I'm not
teenager.
really convinced. I was quite stubborn back in the day. Maybe I still am, but still. Like advice from my parents, like management and HR. I know they mean it well. But when I go to my sister instead and ask, well, I want to go out late maybe, like what are your tips and tricks that I can use, like from your own experience? That is something that I'm going to adapt because I trust her. I know she has taken the path already. So that is something that I like to like refer, like your coworkers, the peers, they are your siblings.
Right.
They have done it before and you trust them. You know they want the best for you. So it's kind of hard when you only have your mom and dad and there are no siblings to ask. So
But I love this explanation because if you see this as a family, right, and you look to your older sister as that influencer, then you have your parents, which in this corporate terms are like HR, L&D, who need to do something about this. So what can the parents, what can the L&D personnel do to work with these learning influencers?
Well, first of all, they can reserve some of their time to allow them to do this, to document their journey, because that's all it is. And because every day, every organization on this planet is creating knowledge. They are solving problems every day.
In their own little niche.
Exactly. And whatever they're doing can be beneficial to their peers. Like in your role, it can be beneficial to you if your colleagues find something out about a product, about a niche, about a customer that can be beneficial to you. And if you can actually do something with that knowledge, if you can turn that into something that other people in the organization can use, it's not lost. Otherwise, when you leave the company at some point, or when, I don't know, anything changes, then this knowledge is gone with you.
Yeah.
And if companies allow people to actually do something with that, and it doesn't need to be everybody, but I would start with the ones who voluntarily want to do that, who want to document what they're achieving, who want to document what they're learning, especially, which is a cultural thing again, because if I'm documenting what I'm learning, this means I need to be open about what I can't do yet, which again is very hard for many
Very
organizations.
vulnerable.
Yeah, because people need to admit that until today, I didn't know that this worked that way.
Yeah.
And in many companies, that's a problem. And I think that's what the parents can do. Allow them, this is part of your job now. We can help you to do this. You can document in whichever format, whichever media you want to document that. And then we can make that accessible for also siblings.
Right. So give them the resources so they can document actually what they're doing.
Yeah.
And how they influence. But we need to take this small step back, right? Because now we're talking about learning influencers and what they do to give their knowledge to the next generation, let's say. But how do I identify who those learning influencers are? You've already been talking about the passion that they might have for learning, but for L&D, who are quite near and dear to the personnel, they need to look at who is this person that we're giving this task to, right? So how do we identify that?
So I would say, first of all, in the learning and development world, people talk a lot about learning when in fact it's just consumption. I think we need to be honest about that, learning means some sort of change.
Slurping up knowledge.
Learning means some sort of development.
Yes.
Some development is happening. You've got a background in psychology, you know what the definition of learning is. And in many cases, that's not the case, because when we say learning, what we mean is content consumption in many cases.
Yeah.
Now, what needs to change is that the people who actually make a development inside an organization, I can see that you're developing in your role, and on the way, you would like to be transparent to the organization and actually talk about what you've learned. For example, I don't know, negotiation tactics, or how to approach a room full of people who actually don't want me to be there. Whatever it is, the experience that you make, that's the thing that we need you to talk about in that document format. And if I have anybody in the organization who voluntarily wants to share that, everybody else can learn from that. And so it's not about your role, or it's not about what you exactly do. It's about, is there a noticeable change within you in that role? And if there is, then it's worth talking about it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's my view. Yeah.
So we've actually already identified these people because they already exhibit that passion, is basically what you're saying, right?
Yes, and sometimes no, because sometimes that happens without anybody noticing. Because people don't talk about what they aren't able to do yet. They maybe aren't as transparent about their development and stuff like that. So as a learning and development organization, or that part of the organization, we need to be very sensitive when it comes to those people and see who is actually making a change, who is going through some development, and who of those can we maybe then enable to talk about that within the organization.
Who's going above and beyond.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that, because that puts it, from my point of view at least, in this performance corner, which I think is not always important, because performance is numbers, and numbers only tell one side of the story. Whereas when we look at development, we also want to know who are maybe the hidden champions. And sometimes we don't find them by looking at the numbers. We find them by asking around.
Yeah.
Who's helping you with that? Who helped you with that? Who do you call? And if everybody says, we're always calling Micah. And even if like the numbers don't represent anything of that, well, then we probably need to talk to you, because you're the one who has got all the information.
Yeah,
I
and
see
think
Micah
it's-
nodding a lot.
Yeah. That's the point that I actually wanted to bring up, because you always have to articulate, like, we are looking for learner influencers, like not just wait for them to appear magically, because obviously there will be people willing to talk about what they learned and like really outgoing and being vulnerable and saying, well, you know what, that was something I did wrong in the past and I learned it and I would just want to share my experience. But then there's also people who learn stuff, but they are not yet sharing it because they don't know that you are caring. Obviously, like, they know learning is important, but if you are looking for learner influencers in your organization, just tell your peers that you are, because otherwise you will just have like those outgoing people that are willing to share, but you miss out on all the people that are not really confident in sharing because they don't know this is actually a thing.
Yeah.
So I think
More
it's
extroverted
important.
people.
Yes, it's important to really address it and say, you know what, we care about learning. We want your guys' experience. Let's talk.
Well, this is actually an interesting point that you're bringing up, because this brings us good into the second statement that we want to discuss today, which is user-generated learning content isn't used to its full potential by L&D departments. And this is sort of what you've already been saying, right? How do we find those people that know how to generate content, and what is that content, and how do we use that? So what's your take on this?
It's a difficult one because I'm a perfectionist. And when you tell me to put some piece of content out there,
It'll be perfect.
I will spend quite some time on it,
Right.
because I feel like, well, I want to have it like as good as I can, and I want everybody to have a great experience consuming this content that I created. But we all know done is better than perfect. And well, this is why I'm not really sure how to tackle this point. But yeah, I feel like if you just create a culture of, it could be as easy as creating like a little post on Teams saying, you know what, this is a shortcut that I just learned.
Right.
That's a piece of content that I can share. And people might not be aware of what is actual learning content. So I think that is a point that you have to make clear before you actually go out and collect all these pieces of content, because it doesn't have to be a full thought through online course.
Right. It can also be just a small little tidbit that
Right.
you've seen, that you've noticed somewhere, a
Right.
shortcut.
And then you have to collect them somewhere, because otherwise, I don't know, where am I going to look?
Yeah, exactly. But this is also the point, right? Where do we collect that, and what is L&D's role in this? How do they start this? Do you have any ideas on that?
I think it will depend on the company itself. Some will try to make it work somewhere within their learning management system. Some have some sort of enterprise social network. Some will do it in small Teams channels. And
As for me, I just Slack everyone I see.
But in the end, I like to view it in two steps. One is curation and the other is creation. So if you find something, like you said, that was helpful to me, well, it will damn sure be helpful to somebody else if they know where to look. That's the thing. So, and I think that's also where maybe AI will be able to help in the future, because if I'm not able to voice a question at all, I might start writing a few things or asking a chatbot a few things about a topic. And then I might be presented with what you have found out before. So there are a lot of uncertainties in there, where I think up to this point, we can benefit from at least somebody being able to follow you, like on a social network.
Right.
Because I know that you're very good in our sales tool. You're very good in finding out the small functions that nobody else gets. And you've got the perfect process figured out. And so everybody who's following you there will always get the best tips, because you've got your own sources, but then you become like a source by yourself. And that's how I view people generally. Everybody is a channel. So whatever you see, whatever we experience gets filtered through our channel. And by curating that, by turning that into something new, people will then be able to tune into our channel and learn something new.
That's a good point.
That's why I believe it's so important to also have the chance to follow somebody and actively say, I want to listen to what Maike has to say in her daily 3 minutes of sales talk.
Right, yeah.
Whatever it is that you find out, whatever it is that you experience throughout your daily life. And that already would have so much benefit, because I mean, if we look at high quality content, for example, if you consume high quality content that helps you achieve something, well, then maybe I don't need to look at all of that. I don't need to watch all of that, but I get your filtered view of that. And you say, I watched this 3-minute learning nugget on communication tactics, and it was great. And I watched this on whatever, and I didn't so much enjoy it because it didn't get to the point, whatever. And that's how I view learning influences as well, as you're a filter for everything that's out there. And through your view, I can then get access to all those nice things that I would have otherwise maybe not found. And that's
great point.
How I view it.
I'm looking into my own past, right, in this, and I just sort of joked just now that I just post everything I see on Slack, but this is, to your point, exactly what people should be doing then, right? Just sharing some content that they've enjoyed or that they've seen, so other people can then look at it, consume the content, but then learn from that and be motivated to make stuff themselves. So, Mike, is there anything that your team is doing in this?
Well, yes. Actually, we talk a lot about who is good in what.
Very good.
Because it doesn't always have to be the content itself.
Right.
It can also be an expertise that you have. So, for example, I deal a lot with data security, IT security stuff. Not quite enjoying these kind of topics, I'm not going to lie. But I do have a colleague who's really good in this stuff. And he's also very helpful. So whenever I have like a new case for his expertise, I reach out and know he's there to help me. And we can get this done much quicker than I would have done it myself. So it's super important to be open with your team, maybe even your whole organization. Depends on your organization, I guess. But start within your teams and make your strength and your knowledge visible. So that is something that we really like. Also to optimize processes and learn from each other, to do that in our team. Yeah.
Right. So to close this subject off a little bit, the role of L&D in this, right? What should that be? Is that mostly facilitating then?
So from my point of view, I think what L&D can do is try to provide the frameworks. Like what you've said before, you probably have heard of a team learning board, is a way to make that visible.
Yeah.
What are you learning? What are you good at?
Yeah.
And when I talk about content, I talk about content because maybe the organization is too big for what you're describing, because what you're describing is the best way to do that in a team. Nobody needs to produce hour-long videos to talk about that stuff if I can just go there and talk to him. But if I have a bigger organization where everybody can actually benefit from that, well, then it makes sense to also produce user-generated content. And from my point of view,
more centralized.
Yeah, from my point of view, L&D can provide the framework. What are the different formats, for example? So to make it recognizable, we talked about that before. So if I know that if I click on that, I know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a shaky video where I don't understand what's going on, but it's a format that I understand. It takes 1 minute and it gets me to the point. So, yeah.
Good. Now, if we look at employees and learning influencers that make learning content in this, then there is one sort of problem that pops up, right? They are not psychologists. They are not teachers or educators. And this is actually the third statement that we're going to talk about today, which is learning content quality is at risk in user-generated learning content. So I touched upon this a little bit, right? That colleague of yours, Maike, that knows a lot about IT. I know a lot of people who are really good at IT, but they're not that good at teaching, I can tell you. So how do we deal with that? How do you deal with that? Might be a better question.
I'll just let him do my work so he doesn't have to teach me. No, that's not the solution, I know. Well, I mean, in that case, it's like a direct contact. I have a conversation with him. It's not that much about how do I deliver. Well, I can have a conversation directly. But regarding quality of content, I think it's crucial because also, I gave the example, I learned about a new shortcut. That shortcut might not be working in some time, I don't know, for whatever reason. So it's also crucial to really be aware of the content that you have.
Right.
Because otherwise people will just get confused. And then for me, as I said, I work in sales. So I use a customer relationship management tool that has a lot of buttons and fields and info.
Bells and thingies.
Yes. And these things change for whatever reason. It might be because the program changed or we decided on tackling in another way. So creating a video for explaining how to work with that tool wouldn't be like my preferred like format of choice because it's quite hard to adjust. There might just be one little button that changed, but you recorded a whole hour of content and now people won't find that button. So really be aware of what kind of content are you sharing? What are the chances that the topic is going to change or like the way of like working with it is going to change? And then being aware of what format is going to suit best. In that case. So maybe I'm going to go with a PowerPoint presentation because I can just like switch a slide or, you know what I mean? So quality is crucial because I've been there. You go through like a learning format and you realize it's not up to date. Really frustrating. And then take another look for another content. And it's just frustrating. And that's not what we want to create with L&D. So I think that might be the perfectionist in myself. Thinking about the format first is very beneficial. So yeah, I do think it is at risk, but not to the point to not create any content. It's just think ahead.
You have to make like a mind switch.
Yeah.
To at least think ahead of what sort of content you will be putting out.
That's my way of thinking, though I can assume you have another point of view.
I wouldn't say another point of view.
You're taking over my job now.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Just curious
Is
myself.
it okay? Can I reply to that?
Yeah, of course.
So, because before we started recording, you said something. Learning is a conversation.
Yes.
And that's the point, right? If we find a format that does that actually shows it's a conversation and it's always changing, then I think we can take care of everything. So if we look at the example that the software changes, then of course, I agree with you. We need to pay attention to how regularly does it change. So does that mean we need to produce stuff more often? Is maybe the best format that, I don't know, we need to have a monthly podcast on that or a monthly video cast. But what my point is that we should try and always have a conversation between somebody who's struggling with it and somebody who's got all the knowledge, because that's where you get the best leverage. And maybe one person who's listening, who knows about didactics, who knows about how to structure things, and then you can do anything because you've got the person struggling who's got the view of somebody who doesn't know anything, or at least a tiny bit, or has their own perspective, then the person who might not be able to teach what they're good at. And then you have got somebody taking care of how to then structure that and try and explain that to the audience. And then I think you can create any format that you need in order to bring the knowledge across.
Right. So we have the learner, the coach, and then the coach, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is putting a lot of power and a lot of responsibility into the hands of employees who aren't really, aware of what learning might be or what learning should look like, right? So this is the risk part of the whole assumption that we're talking about here. So that risk, how do we mitigate that? How do we mitigate that not knowing about L&D and then putting power outside of the hands of L&D?
I don't so much see it as a risk if the coach and the coach are present.
Right.
Because then as somebody who doesn't know anything about that new function, for example, or how to put that piece of data into that software, I can just run free because I don't know. And that's like the deal for the conversation. I don't know how to do this. And like as if I was doing a user interview for the software interface. I don't know how to do this, and I'm just telling you what I'm thinking. I'm telling you that I think I need to click on that icon because it looks like save.
This is what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And that's exactly the process that everybody is going through who doesn't have any idea. And why not turn that into some sort of format? And by the end, the person who doesn't know anything in the beginning will have learned something.
Right.
And all we need is that person's willingness to be open about it. And I'm pretty sure there are many people in the organization who don't have any problem about that because they know by the end of this format, they will have learned something. And everybody else in the organization too, because most of the time it's just people who they don't want to say it out loud, but everybody's thinking the same thing. It's complicated and I don't know how to do this. And do you know how to do this? Oh yeah, I found out this little hack. Look, you can do it like that.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes. And if we can turn that into something that's in any way somehow entertaining, I think you've won. If you've got like somebody from L&D overlooking that, or at least knowing how to put that into a format, how can we make it somehow engaging?
This term's like motivation. You know, the vulnerability into motivation, I want to say. Because that vulnerability of, I don't know what I'm doing at this moment, but here, this is how I do it, and maybe this works, that makes it some sort of learning collective.
Yeah.
Instead of just one teacher saying something to one person, it's more of a collective learning together, which ties nicely into the next statement, of course, which is...
But maybe...
You
said something that,
go for it. Sure.
that I always like to mention when I hear teacher, because I think that's the reason why many people find school so boring, because the teachers aren't learning anything.
Right.
In most cases, most teachers aren't learning anything. They're just the ones presenting. And that's boring because I don't see any development. And back in my time when I was at school, my teachers literally didn't learn anything because they let all their pupils do the stuff they didn't know, like how to operate this DVD player, I don't know. You do it. Yeah. And they didn't want to learn it. And I think that's the worst thing you can do to somebody who's in fact interested in learning something. So if you turn it upside down and have somebody who actively engages in learning, I want to explore that, I want to find out how it really works. Okay, let's go along. Let's follow you on that path. And that's why so many formats work on TV, on YouTube, because it's always a development. It's always you start here and you finish somewhere else. It's a story, and that's how we learn.
The teacher being a learner.
Yeah.
That's it. Cool, because if we look at employee learning, and if we look at just moving away from teachers and like L&Ders who will just create learning paths for you and that would be it, that would mean that employee learning or learning influencers are the future of learning. Again, this is the statement number 4 that I want to discuss with you. Employees actively participating in L&D and not just consuming it is the future. I know you agree. I mean, you've spoken at length with this, but you are one of a lot of employees, right, who also follow learning paths from L&D. How do you feel about this statement?
I do agree as well.
Oh, good.
Because I feel like I don't want to come back to the family analogy, but still.
Oh, please do. It was a good one.
L&D, HR, the management, like my parents, they are telling me a lot of things and advising trainings and telling me what I should do and should learn. And then I understand that and I value that they are actually giving me recommendations. But still, if I really look at what do I need like now and what do I need for my day-to-day job, it's really what my peers, my coworkers have already done or are currently doing. We are all in the process of learning, like every day, each day, constantly, yes. And being aware of that and sharing what I learn and also actively asking other people, what have you learned? Or like, how did you tackle that task? Is, sorry, L&D, but it's much more valuable for me right now than what L&D is providing. They have created an amazing path that I'm going to take anyways. But for my day-to-day job, for what I need right now, for the pain I have right now,
that will not suffice.
Well, it will deliver at some point when I've gone down that path, but still for like the very like usable and quick, I don't know,
day-to-day
impact.
little learning bits,
Yes.
learning bites and stuff.
I think it's so valuable that we already have created that culture within Good Habits, and my team, which is like what who I have contact with every day, is so much more valuable to me. And if that wouldn't be the case, and I would only rely on what L&D and HR is giving to me, that would still be great, and I could still develop myself. But on a practical perspective, I would miss out on so much. So I feel like I learn way more via other influences and peers than I do on the traditional learning path. So to me, I totally agree. It is the future, and it has to be the future. Like, I can say how fast the world is changing, and everything is changing every day, and
kicking in open doors left and right.
Yes,
Yeah.
We all know that.
Right.
So we have to learn quicker also, because the world is asking for it. And I can't wait for L&D to put like a learning path together so I can go that path. I just have to like learn it day to day.
You prefaced this whole story with, I'm sorry, L&D. But isn't this exactly also what L&D should be looking at?
Yes,
Isn't
of course.
this exactly
And
what they're
obviously they are supporting it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we, as I said, we have to articulate, we want influencers in our company. We want you guys to share your knowledge. We want you to make visible what your expertise is. Obviously, that's part of what L&D does. I'm just saying that we have to like put into perspective. We have different ways of learning, and I love to have the variety. And I use different like ways of learning for myself. But if you ask me what the future of learning in like companies is, then I say influencers will play a bigger role in that. And with this world being so quickly changing, that is becoming more valuable with time even. So, yes.
Good. Well, Benjamin, from your expertise, right, because you are a new learning expert, and we're talking about new learning right now, what would tactics be for L&D? We've touched upon this briefly before, I think.
So I think what changes is that, like you've described, from L&D being the owner of the content, right? Previously they were the owner, they owned the
Here's
library.
a learning path. Go for it.
Yeah, they owned the library, they owned the books, and they wrote the books. And if you have a problem, well, we'll produce something which sometimes takes ages to be finished, which in a fast-moving environment isn't the way to go in many cases. So L&D in an organization, from owning the content, they will be turned into owning the process.
Right.
And knowing about the process, knowing about how learning actually works and what they need to facilitate it. And that's the shift that's happening in many companies already, where they then, of course, they still need content. They still need high quality content. They still need user-generated content, but they have a different perspective. So they know how learning works. They know how to coach it. They know which of the content that is available can be used for that. And if it's not available, they will help to make it. And that's the shift that's happening. And so in the future, I see that's where organizations are moving. L&D organizations.
So they should still be owning like the high quality, the top end, the big courses, the big learning paths and stuff, but they should facilitate the process. Can you tell us concretely what sort of facilitation this is?
It can, what it looks like concretely depends on the organization and also what the challenge is at hand, because in the end, it depends on the individual process, on the individual challenge. But they are the ones who help structure the learning in a way so it's beneficial for the individual and the organization.
Right.
And that's where I see L&Ds moving.
Good. Well, thank you both for being here. I think I've learned mostly that we're in a changing process. It's not a changing world, it's a changing process. And we're doing more and more ourselves to make a little bit of learning bits and stuff. But Maaike, what is your takeaway from this?
Well, we've not only talked about influencers, but also user-generated content. I just want to add one more thing here, because I feel like the conversation went a bit to influencers regarding user-generated content, but I just want to go back that influencers are also working with the existing content from L&D that they are actually owning, because I feel like it's super valuable when people talk about what they learned, may that be on their day-to-day job or through a like professional learning content piece that might be provided from L&D. And whether we are talking about user-generated content or like professional content, I think my key takeaway is encourage your peers to talk about what they learned. We talked about vulnerability, which is super important, which brings us back to culture. So really encourage your people to be open, to learn and also share what they learned. And may it be via user-generated content, professional content, whatever it is, just start talking about it and encouraging people. And I think it starts with conversation, and then the rest will fall into place, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Maaike. And you, Benjamin, from your 4:30 p.m. wake-up call until now, what have you learned?
Well, I learned a lot about Deutsche Bahn today. But other than that, I think it remains a conversation worth having, and it's not getting less important, but more important. Also, with the rise of new technology like AI, it will remain a human challenge. Learning has always been and will always be. And I think that's why I think my focus will remain the way it is now, how we can leverage what's already there, how we can enable the people to turn it into something that the rest of the organization can use. And I agree with you. They don't need to make everything themselves. If there's a good thing that explains what I'm trying to tell you, well, I'm going to send you a link instead of produce a video. And if I found out something that I find valuable and I don't find any piece of content that expresses it in a way that I would like it to be expressed, well, then I make it. And I think that's where organizations can thrive in the future, and a way to go for organizations that both ways are possible and both ways are equally important in an organization. And it's still a human challenge.
And there you have it, the new learning process. Maaike, Benjamin, thank you so much for being here. That's all we have for today. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Moving Forward. And if you've learned something new in this episode, please just share it with somebody else. You might just help them learn something new too, like those learners, and move their people forward. So thanks for joining us, and until next time.